Right. Got my glasses on. Yeah. Die Hard. You know it. You love it. And if you don't, you should. One of the greatest action movies ever made. And here's a hot take for you. One of the greatest action franchises ever made. Die Hards 2, 3, and 4, while obviously not being as good as the first, are really solid. The less said about what happens after the fourth one, the better. But as quadrilogies go, it might be the best of all time. I mean, what else is there? Terminator? Toy Story? Did you know, though, that Die Hard is based on a book? Yes, you probably did. It's hardly the groundbreaking revelation it used to be, but yeah, if you didn't know, Die Hard is based on a book. It's based on this book, Nothing Lasts Forever, which kind of sounds like a James Bond title, by Roderick Thorpe. And the adaptation from medium to medium is slick, efficient, and basically perfect in every single way it needs to be. So that's what we're going to be looking at here. Not a beat for beat list of all the differences, but more of an examination of certain aspects of the changes and how they affect the end product as a whole. First though, quick thoughts on the book. The book I read before this was Neuromancer, and to call this a breath of fresh air would be a drastic understatement. It's not that I thought Neuromancer was bad, it's just it was really heavy going. It was so dense and complicated with loads of techno nonsense and the musings of humanity as a whole that a simple book about a bunch of terrorists attacking a building and one guy trying to stop them is like a shot on an inhaler in the middle of an asthma attack. If you read quick, you could finish this in a single sitting. It sucks you in with proper white knuckle tension and then doesn't ask anything more of you as the reader other than to hold on tight and don't let go. Do you think humanity would serve its purpose better under the thumb of a digitized consciousness? Who cares? Want to see a guy chuck an office chair covered in plastic explosives down an elevator shaft? Do you even need to ask? Comparisons with the last book I read aside though, obviously this stands on its own two legs. It is really good. Die Hard in a blank, or Die Hard on a blank, or Die Hard with a blank became a thing for a reason. And this book, while it probably didn't invent the idea of a single person trapped in a single location sneaking about trying to pick off antagonists one by one, it is one of the reasons, being the thing such an influential piece of work is based on. And you can see why. As I said earlier, it's tense, it's brutal, it's funny in places, though not nearly as funny as you'd think if you only ever seen Die Hard, which we will be getting to. It's sad, it's cool, it's epic. It really is a bit of everything, and it's quite easy to see how a Hollywood exec would read it and immediately get the dollar signs in the eyes. It's a sequel too to one of Roderick Thorpe's other books, which is quite funny. Die Hard 1 is not only based on a book, but Die Hard 1 is a sequel. When the movie adaptation gets made of The Detective, they could call it Die Hard 0. Please don't do that though. The characters are great, though not quite as memorable as the movies, which again we'll be getting to. And despite the mad things going on, it all feels very realistic. Our hero feels genuinely fallible and could lose at any point if he's not careful. It builds and it pays off very nicely, and it deserves to have a bigger reputation than it has. So now that I've heaped a bunch of praise on this book, I now am going to say that I think Die Hard the movie is a lot better. Let's get to looking into how. I'd say you could break down the major changes from book to film into two distinct categories: structural changes and tonal changes. I'd say the overall structure is changed less than the overall tone, and both are still similar coming out the other side of the adaptation, but they are not the same. Looking at the structure first, because I've just said it's less affected. If you've seen Die Hard, you can pretty much piece together the structure of Nothing Lasts Forever. You're not going to be going, what? At any point reading it. A man affiliated with the police goes to LA to attend a party at Christmas. Yes, the book is a Christmas book, like Die Hard is a Christmas movie, I will die on that hill. Terrorists attack the building and take everyone at the party hostage, apart from our main character, who has to go all guerrilla warfare, kill the terrorists, and save the day. I outlined this earlier, this is the book, this is the movie. It's what's taken out where the real structural differences are found. Much like the masterful adaptations of The Lord of the Rings, especially Fellowship of the Ring, it is in the streamlining, it is in the removal of the extraneous detail, the stripping back of the set dressing and the fluff where the real differences lie. Our book hero, Joe Leyland, yes, not John McClane, is significantly older than his movie counterpart, and as such has had a long, eventful life. He fought in World War II. This is set in the 70s, so he's not like 90 years old breaking people's necks and climbing walls. He's divorced, he's visiting his somewhat estranged daughter, not somewhat estranged wife. His ex-wife is dead, actually. He's rekindled some things with an old flame from his past. He doesn't see much of his grandchildren, his daughter's kids. He flies planes in his spare time. He's got a lot of stuff going on. How do we know this? Because the book tells you. I had a go at The Last Don for relaying a person's history in these shameless blocks of exposition or these really unnatural flashbacks. So I can't really give Nothing Lasts Forever a pass just because I like it more. But at least these dumps of Leland's backstory are short. The movie takes it all out. There isn't a single flashback to anything that happened in McClane's life prior to the events of the movie. And everything we get that reveals stuff about his backstory is conveyed through dialogue or character actions or the power of acting and facial expressions. It is better this way. Yes, maybe you do lose some character depth like this, but when your boy's picking glass out of his feet and he randomly starts thinking about why his wife left him, I'm alright with losing that depth because it kind of kills the flow and the suspense and the momentum and everything, really. And when you don't have any of that, the flow and the suspense and the momentum aren't killed. Those things are allowed to build naturally and brilliantly. It is evidence for show don't tell distilled down into its most inarguable form. That is the main difference in the structure, the removal of the sections of Leland's backstory. And you could say that removal was inevitable in the adaptation process. What's Bruce Willis going to be doing? He's going to be like shooting a guy and then suddenly I remember the last time I saw my grandkids. Obviously not, but they could have shoehorned it in somehow, but they didn't, and the movie is better off for it. The way Leyland moves and takes action is far more deliberate and methodical in the book, and this also affects the way everything feels like it is structured. There's an almost sterile and surgical edge to the way he does things, planning certain moves, thinking up alternatives and possible scenarios, mapping locations and only doing things after deciding it is the precise right thing or the closest to the precise right thing to do at any given time. Obviously, the movie does have a structure. It has an almost perfect structure, if you ask me. But because of the way McClane sort of flies by the seat of his pants most of the time, it feels much more freeform and wild and exhilarating. And the only other major structural difference between the book and the movie is the opening. The book's opening is significantly more substantial than the movie's. It's not very long, like the movies, but it is so much more detailed that if I didn't know what this was going in, I'd have thought it was setting up a completely different story. Leyland's coming from this police conference in St. Louis and he's flying from there to LA. And there is so much established in this opening stretch. The conference itself, the trip to the airport, at the airport, on the plane. There are so many characters introduced. Cab drivers, road ragers, air stewards, air marshals, a particularly suspicious twitchy guy. There are things going on. Someone even says, in reference to Leyland's flight, that'd be a hell of a flight to try and hijack. Have I stumbled into Die Hard on a plane somehow? Or Die Hard at an airport, which incidentally is Die Hard 2. It is really quite strange, the amount of attention the opening gets. And obviously the movie gets rid of it all. Just showing McClane getting to LA under the opening credits, basically. And now we get to the topic of tone. And I said that this is a bigger difference between mediums than the structure, and it really is. The tone of the movie is actually pretty iconic, something that dozens and dozens of movies have since tried to replicate. It is this perfect blend of action, tension, and humor that shifts and adjusts its ratios of those three things, but never really loses any of those component elements. Movies of the time of similar ilk were either straight comedy, straight action, straight tension, or straight Arnie. And there's nothing really that bridged any sort of gaps. And not only does Die Hard bridge those gaps, it also does it kind of effortlessly. And it's this sort of natural, effortless quality that other films, including its own sequels, I'll admit, never really recaptured. Think of it in like MCU terms. I think Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and Thor Ragnarok come across as effortlessly funny and effortlessly good, while Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and Thor Love and Thunder try way too hard in so many different areas. And while Guardians 2 is way better than Love and Thunder, neither of the two films really live up to the films that came before them. Die Hard is epic when it wants to be without sacrificing realism in too mad of a way. Die Hard is edge of the seat thrilling without sacrificing moments of calm and character reflection. And Die Hard, most importantly, without sacrificing any of the overall threat, does not take itself too seriously. Nothing Lasts Forever, on the other hand, does take itself very seriously. It takes itself very seriously in almost every aspect, but mainly stemming from the main character and the main villain. Joe Leland, while not immune to dropping the funny one-liner here and there, is not your lovable John McClane. Joe Leland is this bleak, guilt and PTSD-riddled husk of a man. He'd been an alcoholic for the majority of his life, that has basically fallen completely apart, and he ruminates quite often on the savagery of the human condition. Each kill he gets weighs on him terribly, where they're sort of water off a duck's back for McClane. And maybe that's more realistic, but it does result in his head not being a very nice place to be some of the time. His daughter dies at the end, where in the movie he manages to save his wife, and it's even implied that he himself might die because of the wounds he suffered. It is so dark. Everything orbiting the main character is just so very dark. And as I said a moment ago, that includes the main villain. Alan Rickman almost made a creepy incel loser bully somewhat likable. So getting him to play the villain in Die Hard and have his dialogue be smart, charismatic and funny, you kind of know what you're going to get. His book equivalent though, while still threatening and intelligent, is nowhere near as memorable or likable. Anton Gruber of the book is a sanctimonious, holier-than-thou revolutionary. He hates the capitalist world and how it supports brutal military regimes in smaller countries. And yeah, he's probably right to do so. He just needs to get down off his high horse all the time. Hans Gruber of the movie is none of these things. In fact, his whole character concept seems to have been designed to mock his book counterpart. Hans Gruber is, first and foremost, a thief. An exceptional thief. He puts up this charade of being a terrorist, even making up demands for the FBI to release his fellow revolutionaries in another scene that makes you really enjoy the character. But the twist is, he just wants the money in the building's vault for intentionally comical, selfish, and very self-aware reasons. In the book, Anton Gruber wants to destroy the money in the building's vault for grand and selfless but ultimately too big and earnest reasons for them to come across as anything other than a little lame, to be honest. And therein lies the difference between the two characters and sums up nearly all of the changes in the adaptation process. So that's how you turn a good book into a great movie. You take out the padding and the plodding and you shave it down to a rapid, crazy razor's edge. You take out the darkness and the themes too noble for real people to resonate with, and you make it light where it can be and grounded where it needs to be. Man, I love Die Hard. Hello. Thanks a lot for getting to the end of the video. Like and subscribe. 2 weeks time, we'll be starting our new filler week series to replace Yu-Gi-Oh! R. I have an idea of what it's going to be. I'm pretty sure it can work. It's just going to be a little bit different to the formats of nearly every video I've done so far. Maybe it won't be. We'll see. I am going to actually have to buy some books for it though. Every single book I've ever done a video on this channel, I owned before starting the channel. I own some of the books that I'll be covering in this new series, but some are missing. So I'm going to have to purchase some, and I hope they are not really expensive, because I think Yu-Gi-Oh! R now is quite expensive, so luckily I had that. We'll see.